The night hung heavy over the rolling hills of southern France, the sky black and pierced only by stars and the distant flashes of artillery. The air smelled of wet earth, smoke, and gunpowder, thick and suffocating. In the darkness, a lone soldier crouched atop a low ridge, his heart pounding louder than the distant explosions. His name was Audie Murphy, barely 19, a boy from a small Texas farm who had grown up wrestling pigs and plowing cotton fields. He was lean, tough, and quiet, but no one in his regiment had ever imagined the magnitude of courage he carried inside him. The young private had already seen death up close. He had fought across Italy and France, survived ambushes, and faced enemy fire more times than he could count. Yet tonight he faced something even greater a force that could have shattered any ordinary man. Murphy's unit had been caught in a precarious position near the village of Holzwihr. Intelligence had reported a German counterattack, a massive one, and now, under the cover of night, the enemy had arrived. Over 200 soldiers, fully armed, were advancing, confident in their overwhelming numbers, unaware of the boy who waited silently for them. Murphy adjusted his helmet, checking the ammunition in his pockets and the belt of his M1 rifle. His rifle was nothing special, just another tool of war, but in his hands, it was about to become the weapon that would define heroism. He glanced down at the small hill where the enemy would emerge, listening to the whispers of the wind, the snapping of twigs under boots, the low hum of tanks in the distance. He could have run. Retreat was an option. Others might have chosen it, but Murphy didn't even consider it. Retreat wasn't in his nature. He was here to fight, to hold the line, to protect his comrades. The ridge was the last barrier between the German advance and the soldiers behind him. And so he stayed, crouched, barely breathing, a single boy against an army. The first wave came at dawn. The enemy soldiers were cautious at first, moving through the shadows, but then confidence took over, and they began to charge. Murphy waited until they were close enough, and then, like a storm unleashed, he opened fire. The M1 rifle cracked, bullets ripping through the morning mist. One soldier fell, then another. The Germans froze, stunned by the sudden fury from a single man. He fired with precision, every shot calculated, every movement fluid. The boy from Texas moved along the ridge, ducking behind rocks and shell craters, luring the enemy into the trap of his marksmanship. He was calm, almost methodical, despite the chaos around him. He was alone, but he fought like a squad of men, each bull a testament to survival, to determination, to sheer will. The Germans regrouped and advanced again. This time their numbers pressed closer, more aggressively. Murphy had no backup, no reinforcements, no artillery support. Just him, his rifle, and his resolve. He stood up, exposed himself, and fired from a more elevated position, drawing fire away from his wounded comrades. Bullets ricocheted off rocks around him. Smoke and dust choked the air, and yet he didn't falter. Hours passed. The battle seemed endless. Murphy ran out of rifle ammunition, yet the Germans kept coming. He scavenged weapons from the bodies of the fallen, loading pistols, rifles, anything that could stop the tide. And then, when the situation reached its most desperate, he climbed onto an abandoned burning tank, using its mounted machine gun, and poured fire into the enemy ranks. Every pull of the trigger was a fight for survival, every movement a testament to courage beyond his years. The Germans, baffled and terrified by the relentless onslaught, began to falter. Reports from those who survived later said they could not comprehend how one man, barely grown, could hold a ridge against hundreds. They described him as a force of nature, a single hurricane of steel and courage. As the morning wore on, the counterattack faltered. Murphy's relentless defense had bought enough time for reinforcements to arrive. When the battle finally ended, the ridge was littered with casualties, the bodies of the enemy strewn across the field. Murphy himself was shaken, covered in dirt and blood, but alive. His face bore the exhaustion and the pain of combat, yet there was something unbroken in his eyes, a resilience that could not be measured by medals or accolades. News of his heroism spread quickly. Soldiers whispered his name with reverence. Officers shook their heads in disbelief. How could one young private face 200 trained enemy soldiers and survive? How could he protect so many others with nothing but courage and ingenuity? Murphy never sought glory. He never claimed to be a hero. In letters home, he spoke little of his actions, focusing instead on the mundane details of life, the mud in his boots, the hunger of the men, the beauty of a sunrise after a night of horror. But the world would not let his heroism remain quiet. He received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military recognition. But even as the medal hung around his neck, Murphy remembered the ridge in WWII, the men he had tried to save, the fear that had been as close as a heartbeat. After the war, Murphy returned to civilian life, yet the ridge never left him. The images of that morning, the faces of the enemy, the cries of his comrades, the smell of smoke and earth remained etched in his mind. He spoke rarely of it, but when he did, it was not for praise. It was to remind others that heroism is not about seeking recognition. It is about standing when everyone else is running, about acting when fear freezes the hearts of men, about holding on when the world seems determined to crush you. Audie Murphy's story became legend, a tale of courage and resilience that transcended war. He remained humble, always pointing to his comrades, those who had fought beside him, those who had fallen. He knew the truth, the ridge had not been his alone. Every bullet fired, every movement made, every heartbeat spent fighting for others had been a reflection of the countless lives intertwined in the chaos of war. Even decades later, historians and soldiers studied that ridge, the battle that seemed impossible. And still the central truth remained: one man, armed with nothing but determination, courage, and skill, had stood against 200 enemies and survived. That ridge, that morning, and that boy from Texas became a symbol of the extraordinary capacity of ordinary men, a reminder that the human spirit can endure the unthinkable. Murphy's life after the war was a testament to the same principles. He became an actor, a writer, a storyteller, carrying the lessons of courage and humility to a world that had never known the full weight of his heroism. And though the battlefield was far behind him, the ridge at Holtz, where remained alive in his memory, a monument not of stone, but of human will. Audie Murphy's courage inspired generations, a timeless story of valor. One man against 200 enemies, one man who stood, who fought, who endured, one man whose heroism was not measured by medals, but by the lives he protected and the fear he conquered. And in the quiet moments, when he remembered that ridge and the smoke of battle, he understood a truth that transcended time and war. Heroism is not about being fearless. It is about facing fear, acting despite it, and standing when the world expects you to fall. The world remembers Audie Murphy not because he was invincible, but because he was human, and in his humanity he found a courage that would never be forgotten.